Now I am going to focus on how you can stop giving energy to the things you don't want and the things you don't believe in. But why would anyone, let alone you, want to give energy to what you don't want and what you don't believe in? Let's go back briefly to those 7 little magic words, as you think, so shall you be. This universal law applies both ways. When you put your thought energy on your intentions with passion, you ultimately will act upon those thoughts, and you are bound to attract what you are thinking about into your life. This law also works to keep you from attracting solutions for your problems into your life. How does this work? Your mind is active all day long with some 60,000 separate thoughts. Examine those thoughts. How many of them are on what you don't want? With my luck, it'll never work out. This cold is getting worse each day. The deal will probably fall through. These meals will add 20 pounds to my waist alone. Quitting smoking is so hard. It'll probably rain and ruin the outing. You begin to get the idea? If your thoughts are on what you don't want, no matter how much you abhor the thought of what you don't want materializing into your life, you will act upon those thoughts, and more of what you don't want will keep showing up. Here's how to change this old habit. When you find yourself thinking a thought that focuses on what you don't want, no matter how insignificant it might be, stop right there and silently ask yourself, what do I want? That is, instead of thinking that your arthritis is going to get worse, which is precisely what you don't want, then change the thought to an intention. This arthritis is going to disappear from my life completely. Eventually, slowly but surely, you will begin to act upon this new intention, which is a faster energy, and this new intention will become your reality. You will do whatever you have to do to avoid suffering with your arthritis. You will not complain about it because you are no longer thinking of it as a problem. And miracle of miracles, your body, which is a system of energy, will react to your thoughts as well. But more important, you will be putting your energy on solutions. For instance, in a parking situation, your thoughts shift from, there will likely be no place to park, to, I'm looking for my parking place. Suddenly, you've stopped looking for no place to park, and the energy changes to accommodate you. The secret lies in the continuous reminder to yourself to first stop the outward verbal expression of what you don't want, second, catch yourself and examine the thought behind that expression, and finally, shift to an intention of what you will be creating for yourself, even if you don't know how you will create it, because ultimately you will access higher and faster universal powers to provide you with the solutions. Here's another reason why it is so difficult for people to become problem eliminators and attract into their lives what they want. It is very easy to spend your energy on the circumstances of your life, or on what is. Even if you detest the circumstances of your life, if you place your energy on what it is that you despise, you will act on those thoughts, and those conditions which you despise will continue to manifest into your life. This is one of the most troubling energy areas to change, largely because you have very likely been surrounded by people who complain and whine about their life circumstances. Let's say you have very little money and you label yourself as poor. How much time do you spend thinking and talking about being poor, complaining about the circumstances under which you are forced to live, whining about the shortage of money? Keep this statement in mind if you are in this category of scarcity consciousness. You cannot manifest prosperity from thoughts of, I hate being poor. What is required of you is a shift from the energy of what is onto the energy of what you want and what you intend to create. Every time your thoughts are on the circumstances of your life which you dislike, shift to what you would like to experience as your present circumstances, and then make the big leap to higher spiritual energy by visualizing what you intend to create. This applies to everything in your daily life that you call a problem. You cannot manifest thin from thoughts of, I hate being fat. You cannot manifest purity from, I despise being an addict. You cannot manifest health from, I abhor being sick. In each of those assertions of what you dislike, you are giving of your thoughts to create more of the same. On the other hand, if you put your inner energy on your preferred self-picture, hold that vision as an intention, post your perfect weight in as many places as possible, and send love to yourself, surrendering to higher divine guidance to walk with you on your path to your ideal weight, you will act upon the new intentions, and you'll have brought a higher energy spiritual solution to your weight status. If your energy in the form of your thoughts is on the illnesses or discomforts of your body itself will react to those thoughts. As Norman Cousins put it, the greatest force in the human body is the natural drive of the body to heal itself, but that force is not independent of the belief system. Everything begins with belief. The power of God is a creative, sustaining power. Resist not evil means to not give any credence to evil as a power in the first place. Once you embrace the idea of one power, you commune with that power and let go of the illusion that a power other than that of God created your problems. Divine love will meet every human need. Mary Baker Eddy is responsible for these words being printed on the wall of every Christian Science church. Divine love will meet every human need. How is it possible to believe this? People continue to have many unmet needs in the presence of divine love. They feel divine love and still their problems and sicknesses persist. This statement does not imply, as many who wish for the resolutions to their problems assume, that divine love is out there doing it for you or to you. Divine love is something that you must express, and when you do, your every problem or need will be met. You cannot have God and have fear as well. Generally speaking, most people are afraid to become that which they can envision in their most glorious and perfect moments. Fear of your highest possibility keeps you from knowing God and living a life in which you can access spiritual solutions. Essentially, there are two overriding emotions, love and fear. And those two emotional states cannot be experienced simultaneously. Replace fear by simply allowing a feeling of love or the presence of God to reside right in that same ghostly spot where the fear was. Don't feel spiritual, be it. You don't wander around all day feeling moral or honest. You simply are a moral person. If you consciously felt moral, you would be broadcasting it all day. Instead, you simply are honest and moral, and your behavior comes from within you. The same is true of your spirituality. Being spiritual is not an emotional accomplishment to praise yourself for. It is your way of being with God that is as natural as your health, morality, or even your artistic sense. Trying to feel spiritual is not the same as being it. By simply recognizing your connection to God and inviting that part of yourself to consciousness, you are raising your energy level to the level of spirit. But if you make yourself a pawn in a game of how mystical can I feel, you invite ego to begin to try to get more spiritual points than your opponents. It is that very elitist world of the lower vibrations that you want to leave behind. Don't try to feel spiritual. Just be it. God cannot be divided against God. God is an infinite power which cannot be fragmented or divided. That is, God cannot be available for some people and unavailable for others. God cannot be here one day and gone the next. He cannot be in anything that is evil and also be in that which is good. In defining God, all discussion disappears, and you have only the one, all-knowing, all-good, all-loving presence. When you find yourself in duality, you are in the physical world where you perceive yourself as laden with problems, and you seek solutions. Your ego insists the solution to being sick is to find health. The solution for scarcity is abundance, and the solution to pain is pleasure. It is not God that is divided into good versus bad, disease versus health. It is you. The absolute way to health, prosperity, and love is in knowing that disease, scarcity, or evil never can be acknowledged as having power. If you ask God to heal you, you are acknowledging that God made you sick. When you ask God for special favors, you acknowledge a God power that kept those favors from you. Instead of seeking benefits or favors from God, remind yourself to commune with this eternal presence that is in you. Bring this presence to the illusions that are in your mind called problems. Harmony is your normal, natural state of being. A mind imbued with ignorance or error will keep the body in a constant state of disrepair and problems. Harmony is your natural state of being, because when you are natural, you are in the hands of the one loving presence called God. It is your mind that creates problems for you. Your mind has the power to steer you through this lifetime and make it a marvelous voyage. When you reach spiritual peace, Your mind and body are the instruments through which God energy flows. At this consciousness, there is no limit to what can be revealed to you. As you become more aware of your divinity, you will discover your abilities to remove illusions of illness, scarcity, and evil. This harmonious relationship with Spirit is your natural state of being. I never attempt to influence God, to ask for favors, or beg God to do something for me while I wait around and do nothing. Instead, I use prayer to open the gates of my soul to this divine presence.
You see, my evolution has brought me to the point of understanding that each human being on our planet must take total responsibility for his own inner development, And our inner development is something that we ignore a lot as we progress through this whole ladder of life. And I think of a metaphor. The metaphor is like a candle, and the candle flame that is burning inside of you, all right? Now this candle flame, if you take a candle and walk out of here this evening and you see raindrops falling, it'll blow out your candle, and the wind will blow out your candle. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen outside of you that you have absolutely no control over to blow out your candles. Your candles are getting blown out all the time. We have an inner candle flame that must never flicker, though the worst goes before us. And that's perhaps the highest place we can get to in our lives, is to understand that what our own inner development, symbolized by that candle flame, must never change, must never even flicker. It is our responsibility, not only for ourselves, but for our children as well, to raise them to believe that whatever is going on inside of you is entirely up to you. You own it. It is yours.
If you were raised on blame, it is a habit for you to reach for this excuse whenever you wish to explain why something is not working in your life. You can, for instance, blame lack of prosperity on a lot of externals: your culture, the stock market, politicians, your parents, lady luck, the greed of others. You can blame illness on heredity and the flu season and bad luck or the environment. Your sour relationships can be blamed on your partners, their inability to love you, your upbringing, or your parents. Your personality can be blamed on your parents, or your genes, or your childhood, or your siblings, or your birth order. And your physical appearance can be the fault of genetics, the food manufacturers, advertisers, or the polluted environment. This is potentially an endless list. The alternative to blame is self-responsibility, becoming an inner-directed person. You may not have been taught to consider taking responsibility for the events of your life. But if you are unwilling to discontinue the blame game, you will be unable to initiate your sacred quest. When you are inclined to think that someone else is responsible for your circumstances, take an instant to say a prayer of thanks for the lesson. The lesson is to become aware that you are the one who is experiencing the feeling. You can do this the instant that you recognize yourself playing the blame game. Feel thankful toward those you've let anger you. Give inner thanks for the reminder that the feeling you are experiencing is inside you, not outside you. Say to yourself, I do not want to be right. I want to know the truth. I want my higher self to rule. No one is to blame for how I am feeling. It is my feeling, and I respect that. These kinds of affirmations will lead you to self-reliance and to the way of the sacred quest. Your spiritual soul will then become the guiding light for the remainder of your time in the now here.
I'm going to give you another truth. Everything that is happening to you, whoever you are listening right at this moment, everything that's happening to you in your life, you have a voice in. You are creating. If you're not getting along with somebody on the job, if you're having difficulty in your relationships and feeling victimized, if your children don't respect you, look at yourself first and say, what is it about me? And what can I change in order to help myself not feel victimized? Not how can I get them to change? How can I make the world different? It's one of the fundamental problems, is that people want the world to be different than it is. The world is perfect. There's no anxiety in it. There's no depression in it. There's no stress in it. Contrary to anything you've heard, the world is not a stressful place. It's a perfect place. You are a part of that world. You are part of the universe. Your perfection is also in your own creation. You're not a mistake. None of it is. There's only anxious thinking. There's only stressful thinking. There's only angry thoughts. There's no anger in the world. When you stop having that and replace that with this serenity I'm talking about, with this peace inside of yourself, you don't even know how to be victimized anymore. It's not like you learn all these strategies. You become healing instead of becoming poisoned. You are effective rather than trying to get there. You live it. You see, when you get enough inner grace or inner peace or serenity, whatever you want to call it, and you feel really positive about yourself, it's almost impossible for you to be controlled and manipulated by anybody else. When you squeeze an orange, what comes out of an orange is what's inside. When you squeeze a person and put pressure on a person of any kind, and anger and hatred and stress and tension and depression come out, it isn't because of who is doing the squeezing or when they do it or how they choose to do it. It's because that's what's inside. And if you don't have it inside, it can never come out, no matter who you're living with. No matter how tough it may seem to you. And when somebody cuts you off on the freeway, and you're mad as hell and going to get even with them, you're going to get up in front of them and slow down and make them see what it's like, it isn't because they cut you off that you're so upset. It's because that's what you carry around inside. And I refuse to be victimized by my need to be right through using anger and being upset and so on. When you are able to visualize yourself doing something, you start acting on that visualization or that image. You're able to make things happen when you're looking for solutions that you can never make happen when you're more preoccupied with being a victim.
Principles for changing your agreement with reality. And I want to just read you this from Hawkins' brand new book, The Eye of the Eye, E-Y-E of the Eye. And the first one of these is just simply the word attitude. And this is what he says about attitude. The way of spiritual advancement through consciousness is actually uncomplicated and simple. The primary quality is really one of attitude, in that one looks at life not as a place to acquire gain, but as an opportunity for learning which abounds even in the smallest of life's details. A spiritual attitude leads one to be friendly, kind, and well-meaning to all life. We find ourselves walking over an ant carefully rather than squashing it, not as a compulsive must or a religious rule, but out of a greater awareness of the value of all life. All animals will be discovered to actually be individuals who respond to respect and attention. Even plants are aware of it when you love and admire them. That's an attitude. That's the attitude I'm speaking about here. So the first word is attitude. The second is something that's a word that I like. It's called radical humility. Radical humility. That is, it is an easing up of the ego. Who I am is a piece of God. And as a piece of God, I am radically humble. That is, I have no need to make myself better than anybody else. I've often said that true nobility is not defined by being better than someone else. It's defined by being better than you used to be. The third is the ability to give love. The ability to give love. If you want to become a person who changes your mind and rewrites your agreement with reality, the ability to give it rather than to seek it. The fourth is an absence of judgment. To see if you can cultivate an attitude in your life in which you understand that when you judge another person, you do not define them. You define yourself as someone who needs to judge. That is just something that you define in yourself. That the absence of judgment, or the ability to suspend the judgment and rewrite your agreement from a non-judgmental way, will teach you how to resolve problems almost instantaneously. Most of your problems in relationships come from your unwillingness to let go of judgment. The next is giving up guilt. Guilt is nothing more than an attempt to manipulate the past and to make yourself feel less than whole because of anything that you might have done that you feel sorry about. Guilt I've called in Your Erroneous Zones 30 years ago, I called it a wasted emotion. Because feeling guilty about something can only take place in the present. Now, if you do something that you don't like and you'd like to make amends about it, by all means do so. And if you do something that is wrong or unfortunate, or that you feel some shame about whatever, by all means make amends, and by all means work at not doing it again. But feeling guilty does nothing more than mean to have you using up the present moment, being immobilized in the present over something that already has taken place. And again, the past is the past. The next is called willingness, and it's probably the most important key. Willingness means I open myself up to the potential or the possibility of being able to create a problem-free life. Willingness is that whole idea of the first principle, I have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. The idea that I will say to myself, these are the conditions in my life that I dislike, and I am willing to create an intention to change them. Willingness. And the next is letting go of resistance. Letting go of any resistance that you might feel. Most of your resistance to creating a world or a life in which you no longer are attracting the same kind of problems you have is rooted in other people's conditioning processes that you have bought into. Whether it's the conditioning process of the groups that you're a part of, or the family that you're a part of, or the cultural experiences that you've been told are the only way that you can behave or look at a problem. Letting go of all of that. Just, there's no resistance. I open myself up through meditation to be free from resistance. No resistance. And when you do, as they say in Sanskrit, when the student is ready, when you're really ready, readiness and willingness are the same. When you're ready and willing, whatever teachers you need will be there. They'll show up and it works. It's just, it's a universal principle. The next is called compassion. And compassion on the scale of consciousness is one of the highest forces that you can have. Because the final one of these qualities here on creating a new agreement, if you will, is called connectedness. Connectedness. A sense that every single one of us has some connection through this invisible force that flows through all of us. Compassion and connectedness. Rumi's observation. I, you, me, he, she, they. These are distinctions which do not exist in the garden of the mystics. A Persian poet from back in the ancient times in the 13th century, his name was Jalaluddin Rumi. And Rumi has this observation that's been very important and very powerful to me. He said, the morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Let me say it again. The morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. I'd like to take a poll. Just by a show of hands, I'd like to ask how many people in this room, and there's about 3,000 of us here tonight, I'd like to ask you, how many of you awaken at one time or another between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m.? Let me just see by a show of hands. And if you look around, you see that this is a universal experience. Now, what do you think that is? If everybody, almost everybody, awakens at some time between 3 and 4. Now, for some of us, we just interpret that as, all right, this is my age, I'll just run into the bathroom and I'll be right back. And you may make that visit several times a night, I don't know. But there's more to that. And I'd like you to now, of all of those people who raised their hand at this idea that you awaken sometime between 3 and 4 a.m., how many of you awaken at exactly the same time? Exactly the same time, with a little digital clock next to you. What is your time? 3:18. What is your time? 2:20. What is yours? 4:50. So like there's and this happens repeatedly over and over again. My time is 3:13. I awaken at 3:13 night after night after night. I look over, I've got this little clock. It's not an alarm clock, it's just a little digital clock. I just look over and it's 3:13 again and again and again. So what I had trained myself to do in the writing of this book, in the inspiration book, is to put my feet on the floor and say to myself, all right, you are going to awaken, because here's what Rumi said: the morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Do you realize that between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night, this is the time when you're closest to your source? This is the time when it's the quietest. It is the time when it's the most peaceful, when there are the least distractions. And of course in Miracles it says the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. A mind at war with itself remembers not eternal gentleness. Eternal gentleness. That's what you came from. It beckons you back to be awake. It's the most creative time in your life. Try it. Take that moment that you are being called by your source and awaken, and force yourself to shake the cobwebs out. And if you can't, then put your feet on the floor and say, look, if I have to go back to sleep, I'm going to sleep with my feet on the floor. And after a while, that gets very uncomfortable, and you'll get yourself up. Now, when I do that and I get up, that is the most glorious time to be out there. And I go out onto the lanai, and I get this sense of this powerful feeling of inspiration. It's overwhelming to me. And I walk by my writing table, and it pulls me. It's pulling me towards it. It's almost beckoning me and saying, please, please come to me. I want you to, and I sit there sometimes, and I literally wonder, where is this coming from? The words, they just flow, and I sit there, and I write by hand, and as I'm writing and allowing this to flow through my heart and onto the pages, I just think to myself, I wonder what's going to come next. I wonder when it's going to come next. It's almost as if God is saying, this is why you're here. And I can't get you any other time because it's just so busy, and there's horns bonk, and there's so many distractions. But here's a time when you can just be with me. Just be in spirit. Just be inspired. Inspirado. Be in this space with me. And I will then allow what creative juices that you have forgotten about because you edged me out for so much a part of your life. And here it is. And you'll find yourself getting the right ideas. Examining things that you never thought of before. Writing, some of you, I know you do it in your sleep many times, you'll write a poem and it'll be so phenomenal. And then you'll say, well, I'll remember that tomorrow. And then you get up and you can't get any of it. The morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Use those hours. And forget about the idea that, let's see now, I went to bed at 11, and if I get up at 3, that means 4 hours, so I'm going to be 4 hours deficient all day long. I'm not going to be... Forget that. You've got an eternity to sleep. An eternity to sleep. And when you learn to meditate and get quiet and get peaceful, you can always, in 20 minutes time of meditation, any time during the day, get the equivalent of a full night's sleep. Don't go back to sleep.
Here's what Einstein said about that. He said, your imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited to all that we know and understand, while your imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. It's like the power of our imagination is unlimited, and I've often given the example of that you cannot create something for yourself in your life if you don't have an expectation for it. And your expectation for what it is that you'd like to create for yourself in your life is strictly, in your imagination. And if you're living in a place where you are experiencing something like poverty, and you see around you all the reasons why that this is taking place, and you're constantly thinking about, that the economy is down, or I didn't get the breaks, or the money has just run out, and I'm not going to be able to replace it. You've got to be able to keep, understand what Rilke is saying there, that. They'll be lost to you because they're banished by your failure to imagine them. And this power of your imagination, what you place into your imagination, is probably the most important quality that you can have. The power of your imagination affects how it is that you relate to the world, and what it is that you allow into your world, and what it is that you expel from your world before it even gets there.
You have within you a great gift. It's the most powerful gift you've ever been given. It's the gift of your imagination. And in your imagination, in your thoughts, nothing else, go to the place within you where you begin to perceive and see what it is that you would like to be, whether it's the right weight you would like to be, or addiction-free, or to have the job that you want, or to be in the kind of relationship that you would like to have. Just in your imagination and no place else, just go there and create for yourself, and you can't come up with an excuse for it because you're just doing this in your mind. So that's the first thing you do. And then, when you get this firmly entrenched in your mind, you then go to the feeling that accompanies that thought. You're not thinking about what you would like to have, you're thinking from the end. You're thinking there. In your imagination only, you are there. And now, how does that feel? What do you feel? I was at the mall just recently with Sky and Serena, two of my daughters, and this young man walked up to me, young man, 39 years old. And he had a major speech impediment. He was a stutterer. He could barely get words out. But he recognized me, he saw me, and it took all of his courage to come up to me. His name was Vincent. And finally he couldn't get the words out and so on. And I said, well, what would you like? He started immediately talking about his speech impediment. And I said, how would you, in your imagination, what I'd like you to do right here, right now, is I'd like you to see yourself as free of that speech impediment. Just free of it. It's gone. It's completely gone. He said, okay, I can do that. And I said, now, how does it feel? He said, it feels great. See, the thought is what you create in your imagination, but the feeling is where you experience it, in the body. I feel great. I said, what I want you to do is every single time you think about that speech impediment, I want you to go to that feeling. I feel great. Every time you think about losing the weight, I want you to go to the place in your imagination in which you are what it is that you want to weigh, looking the way you want to look. Every time you have a thought about you don't have enough money, I want you to go to the place in your imagination where you are free of that fear of not having enough prosperity or abundance. Just go to that place and then ask yourself, how does it feel? It feels joyful. It feels content.
And a word needs to be said here about failure. You have to understand that you don't fail at anything in life. You can't fail at anything. That's really an important notion. Everything you do produces a result. If you take a golf ball and put it up on a golf tee and you swing at it and it dribbles off to the side, you haven't failed. You've produced a result. The question isn't whether you're willing to fail or not, or what you do, or whether or not you're a failure. The question is, what do you do with the results that you produce in your life? If you weigh 300 pounds and you want to weigh 125 pounds, you haven't failed. You've produced massive results. The question is, what do you do with the results that you have produced? Do you tell yourself that, oh, I'm no good at this, and you put a label on yourself and stay away from the unknown? Or do you make an effort to learn from what you've produced?
I'll give you an example on the tennis court. My doubles partner made a bad shot. and he screamed something out, called himself a name. He said, "Ah, you jerk, you dummy." He was talking to himself. And I stopped and I said, "Lenny, I really don't appreciate it when somebody calls my partner a jerk and a dummy." I said, "Who was that? Who was doing that?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, whoever it is that's calling my partner a jerk and a dummy, I'd like you to get in touch with him and remind him that he's a beautiful guy and he just didn't hit the shot the way he wanted to. I'd like you to tell that person that. It's like a reminder that when you call yourself a name, you know, you got two people going here. You got the person who's the recipient, the jerk, and you got the person doing the calling. Well, you want to get those two in balance. You want to get those two in harmony. You want that person, whoever that is saying, you jerk, to say, you're allowed to make an error in tennis. You have to do it. Nobody goes through a whole match without making errors. And that it's okay, and that you forgive yourself, and you're kind to yourself. And then the recipient of that is in balance. So that those two people, quote, or those two parts of you are in harmony. Because if the part of you that's calling you a jerk, if the recipient of that begins to believe that, then you start acting on what you hear and what you believe. And pretty soon, everything that you say to yourself, if you call yourself a jerk enough, you're going to think that you're a jerk. And that's one of the problems with self-esteem. It's people who have really talked to themselves in such a way that the self and the I, which we've separated, they become the same. And so the person who's doing the calling believes that they're a jerk, and the person who's the recipient believes it. And if they had an observer there, if that I who was doing that instead was saying, you know, you're pretty terrific. You know, you make some mistakes. All of us do, but that doesn't mean that you're bad and that you're not any good. And you get those two in harmony so that you are never calling yourself anything but what you would like to be. And the more you do that, the more that you'll be in harmony.
And you don't learn these things through instruction. You don't learn these things by somebody else telling them to you. You've got to learn them through the direct experience of it. It's almost as if God said, all right, here you are. You showed up, and you want to teach people about self-reliance? Get your little ass into an orphanage for 10 years. And learn how to do that. Learn how to rely on yourself. Become inner-directed. Become self-directed. And don't complain about it, and don't whine about it, and find something beautiful in it. And that's what we do when we're children. We don't wake up when we're an orphan and when we're a child every day and say, oh my God, I'm an orphan again today. It's Wednesday. I was one yesterday, now it's tomorrow. When is this going to end? You don't do that. You wake up and you deal with what you have to deal with. And you get on with your life. And now you can look back at your life, and most people look back at the experiences of their life and say to themselves, if only it would have been different. If only. And there is no if only in there. It was all in order. Life gives exams. Bernie and I and Joan had dinner together last night, and we were talking about the variables that we see in highly successful people. And I said, finally, you know, there's a thread that runs through all of this. There are people who go through life and have really tough experiences. Most of the time when you read about people who abuse their children, and you interview them, you find that, what? They were abused as children. I mean, it's something that you all know. You can shout it out. And then there are some who were abused as a child. I was one, not viciously, but on some occasion. And while this is happening, you make an inner vow that this isn't going to be anything I'm going to partake in. And I would never do this to one of them. Like you learn from it, or you repeat it. You take the things that come along, and when you get to that spiritual place in your life, you begin to see that these things all have great lessons in them. And instead of saying to yourself, why is this happening to me? Isn't this awful, poor me? You begin to say, what do I have to learn from this? Because you have banished the doubt that this is some sort of freak accident that you're in, and you begin to see that this is an intelligent system that you're all a part of.
One of the big victim traps that so many people find themselves in is being seduced by what is over. I always tell people what is over, and you can't change it, you can't should have done it, you can't would have done it, you can't could have done it. You've got to stop all that shoulding on yourself, if you will. And what you want to do here is look at how you get to be victimized by things that have already happened. Everything that you did in your life up until this moment is over. It's done. It had to happen in order for you to get to the next level. Accept that. Don't allow yourself to be victimized by things that you can't change, things that are over. Your parents were the parents that they were. Your parents did what they knew how to do, given the conditions of their life. They didn't do it good, they didn't do it bad, they weren't right, they weren't wrong. They just were who they were. And they did what they knew how to do. And if what they knew how to do didn't fit in with what you think they should have been doing, then learn from it, grow from it. Don't be full of anger and hatred for them. That's the biggest victim trap you can get into, being mad at somebody for what they did 25 years ago. And besides, they're a different person today anyway, and probably wouldn't do it that way at all. So what you want to do is look at everything that you find yourself upset about or manipulated by or controlled by, and change all of that. Shift it around. Shift it around to a new kind of consciousness. And that consciousness is, I can't change what's over. So all of the things that you did in your past, and all of the shoulds that people are imposing on you, are things that you're going to have to watch out for. One of the big victim traps people are going to use is they're going to tell you what you should have done. If only you would have listened to me. If only you would have done it before. If only you would have done things the way I said. And when anybody ever does that, that sends off a signal in me. There's a flag that goes up, and I put that, it's a mental flag, and it goes right up into my head. And that flag, it says, I should have done it that way. I already did it. That's already over. And if somebody starts telling me over and over if only you would have listened to me, I will even ask them questions like, how can I have listened to you now? How can I do that? Explain how I can do that. And usually that just stops them, because they see that there's no way that you can have listened to them when that time is over. If only you wouldn't have moved to Chicago in 1957. If only you wouldn't have done that, you wouldn't be having all these troubles now. How could you not have moved in 1957 when it's in 1991? How can you do that? It's not possible. So you have to be watchful for that and look out for the victimizers who will resort to looking at what is over and try to keep you their victim by constantly putting you back there.
Your life is like a boat, and it's heading up the river at, say, 40 knots, all right? And as it's going, you are somehow able to metaphorically stand on the stern, the back of the boat, and look down into the water. Now there goes your life in this direction, and you're standing here and you're looking down into the water. And you ask yourself these three questions. The first question, what is the wake? What is it? What is this thing that you see? And the answer, the wake is the trail that is left behind. That's what it is. Nothing more, nothing less. It's the trail that is left behind. Second question to ask yourself in this little metaphor, what's driving the boat? What's making this thing go in this direction? The answer, the present moment energy that's being generated by the engine, and nothing more. That's the only thing that's making the boat go in this direction. And in this little scene, this means it's the present moment thoughts that I have and how I am using them that is making my life go in this direction, and nothing more. Because the third question is the most important and powerful question. And ever since I heard it, I've always thought about this whenever I have a tendency to look back here and blame something. Is it possible for the wake to drive the boat? That is, can a trail that is left behind make a boat go in this direction? And of course the answer to that is no. It can't. It's just a trail that is left behind. And in that trail, there are an enormous number of things, and every one of us has a wake. And we have a whole lot of stuff in it. And one of the problems that we have is that we have a tendency to look at the wake and all of the stuff that's in it to explain why it is my life isn't working the way I would like it to work. So that you can take a look at the experiences of your life. I look at the experiences of my life. In the experiences of my life, I spent some years in a series of foster homes. People have said to me, oh, living in a foster home, that must have been terrible. I said, no, it wasn't terrible at all. When you're 6 years old, You don't wake up every day and say, oh my God, I'm living in a foster home. Isn't this awful? Poor me. How come me and nobody else? You don't do that. You don't do that till you're 40. And when you're 40 and your life isn't working and you're bankrupt and you're a drug addict and your relationships are all falling apart and your family's leaving you, and you say, why is this happening to you? You say, what do you expect from me? I had to live in a foster home. My mother liked my sister better. We were too this, we were too... And so it's like we take a look at all of these things in our wake. And I'm not saying here that you shouldn't be in touch with your past and all of the things that are back there, but to use it as excuses for why you can't get where you'd like to get today is something that if you do that, you will never get to this place that I'm talking about in this program, which is this place that I call higher awareness, way beyond ordinary human awareness.